Well, good afternoon, Chris. Thanks for coming on the Life After Business show.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm pleased to be here and look forward to the opportunity to discussing with you today.
For our listeners, why don't you just give them a little bit of a rundown because you've got a very interesting past with a family business and a couple different stages throughout that. And why don't you just give everybody a little bit of a background on how you got into entrepreneurship and what your exposure was?
Okay, the best way of doing it is probably just giving you a little perspective about the company when it was started and that information. Well, the company was started by my father originally in 1962. We had a large family. There was 9 siblings, and he
Wow.
was a he was a Cleveland police officer. So after work, to earn an extra few dollars for that big family of his, he would take people home that were stranded at the Cleveland Hopkins Airport. It just gradually grew into a business, and then he retired prematurely from the police department, Cleveland Police Department, and started this career or his this company, Hopkins Airport Limousine Service. And just throughout the years, probably all my siblings have worked in it at some capacity, whether it was washing vehicles or handing out schedules or helping load luggage at times. Uh,
So
and
how old were you when your dad switched full time to the business?
actually, it was the year I was born that he switched full time. So I always remember that date when he started uh, very easily. And um, in the end, we ended up with about 6 different siblings in the business when we sold it. We had the Hopkins Airport Limousine side of it for a number of years. Then in the late 70s, early 80s, we got into the bus business, and the equity owners, which were my older brothers at that point in time, purchased Lakefront Lines. And it was a good acquisition because the bus industry, at least in this market, was really starting to take off with a lot of the individuals coming into retirement age and looking for tours, whether it be going to destinations or gambling junkets, as they call it. So it was a very good time for to get into the business, and that actually ended up growing to be one of the larger of the two entities that we had, and it was two separate corporations, Lakefront Lines and Hopkins Airport Limousine Service.
Were your parents the sole owners then, or you said you had a couple other siblings? What did the ownership structure look like?
Well, the Hopkins Airport Limousine Service, my parents were the sole owners, and then I was still in just graduating college when they got the lakefront lines of it, or just starting college, I should say. And my 3 older brothers and my father were the only equity owners in that business at that point in time.
And so some of the other siblings that were involved in the business, were they older than you or younger, or what was the span of the ages?
The span of there was 6 of us pretty much involved in the business when it really started to grow through the 80s. The span of the age group was probably a 15-year span for my oldest brother Mike, older brother Mike, who was involved in it, and my brother Jack, Tom, myself, my brother Jim, and my brother Jeff, and then also my sister Maura. But the age difference between the oldest and the youngest was about just under 15 years.
Interesting. So, coming from a family business myself, and the comment that you made about every one of the siblings have worked in it at some point or another, explain to me some of the dynamics that you and your siblings had with the family in the business.
As far as dynamics of what we did there, or how the
Yeah,
business.
just in how I mean, I guess maybe the more point question is, how did you guys separate business and family, and how did the two bubbles overlap?
Well, the it was a 7-day operation business, so business was always around there. From that point, as far as how we separated it, my dad did a pretty good job with that, uh, keeping things separate when it was family time. You might get calls at that time, but they didn't have cell phones early on. So if you got a call, if there was really nobody there to do anything or help, you had to find another alternative. But the family dynamics, we all um, grew up together. My dad loved to hunt and fish, so that's where he spent a lot of time with the family from that standpoint. So we all enjoyed the outdoors. And as far as the dynamics, what it did in a family, I mean, you're always conscious of being in the business. I mean, it worked to some advantages from the standpoint that there was a very labor-intensive business, so my dad was able to draw on what I'll call cheap labor to do certain things.
Yeah.
And it also gave my mom a relief, I think, sometimes by being able to take several of us out to our maintenance facility and help clean the grounds or wash vehicles or clean the garage from that standpoint. So, we were in touch with the business early on.
So how did you guys, with that many of your siblings in the business, how did you guys fall into the roles that you guys got?
Well, that was pretty much by birth order, I would say. The roles, early on, there was my older brothers were pretty much whatever needed to be done. They contributed to. Certain ones leaned towards the maintenance side of it. Certain ones lended themselves more to dealing with the customers and the personal contact with that. And then when we got into the bus side of it, the roles probably came a little bit more defined because of the size of the business and what we had to do with maintaining the business. So, and then we had the two separate companies, so that helped create some differences on who was responsible for what. And then there's always, some individuals that sort of rise to the top, from a more administrative standpoint and what they can do for the business.
And your dad and the management team was pretty clear, it sounds like, on the different expectations that were required of everybody in order to continue to move up?
At times it was very clear. At other times it wasn't. There was, sometimes you had situations where not everybody agreed on how things should be processed or followed. There was times when other individuals had to, step up to the plate to do certain things. And I think that's sort of at least in my experience, that's sort of the dynamics of growing up in a family business. It evolves. And then when you get to a certain level of the business growth, those things sort of work them ways out as far as what's expected of them and what the defined roles are. But early on, you're sort of like your finger in the dike. You're covered to put their hole in that finger in that hole at that point in time. Well, that might be your job for the day.
Yeah, you're closest.
Yes.
So, give our listeners maybe a little bit of a perspective on the size of the companies, and you don't have to share anything that is not able to disclose. But for the limousine business and the bus business, maybe the size when you brought on both those together, and then at the time of the sale.
Well, at the time of the exit, we were about 175 to 150 vehicles. We had 4 different terminals throughout Ohio: Columbus, Toledo, Cincinnati, and Cleveland being our corporate headquarters. And that was pretty much related to the bus side of it. On the Hopkins Airport side, it was pretty much regional to northeastern Ohio, servicing the Cleveland Hopkins International Airport and a large regional airport in the Akron-Canton area. And then we also did contract services under the Hopkins Airport Limousine banner, where we would do contracts, whether it be employee shuttles for the airport or employee shuttles for corporations. We did transit type contracts for an extended period of time, usually 3 to 5 years. Those contracts were with that. And the bus side of it was more or less charters and tours. That was the most of their business that they did.
Interesting. So, for our listeners, some of the things that we discuss are kind of the value key drivers of a business, and you've said the word contracts a couple of times. So, did you explain the nature of the contracts that you had? Were there what were the kind of the terms, and then what was the percentage of the contract revenue versus the other transactional revenue?
Well, the contracts when we started was probably about 3%. When I finally left the company, we were up to about 21% of contract sales, and I pretty much administered that side of it and doing the bid work, preparing everything. And that was important because it really helped iron out or level out the revenue stream. The bus side of it and the airport side of it could be pretty seasonal based on traffic patterns and seasonality related to weather and events. So that helped create a better revenue stream or more reoccurring revenue stream. On the bus side of it, like I said, it was seasonal. Even though that was the largest part of our business was the charters and tours. So it was a good complement for both companies to come together and use their strengths, even though they were, quote, operated independently. One was a C corp, one was an S corp. So, that added to keeping them separate too.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So that's a pretty significant growth go from 3 to 21%. Was that a conscious initiative as you were doing that, or was it because of the fatigue on the seasonality of the other revenue?
It was a conscious effort, and it was also just opportunities within the market that we were able to capitalize on. We had 4 different geographical areas, so we did try to use those as platforms to operate other contracts. We did get into doing contracts on a national basis, where we operated some in California and some in Maryland in the beginning, but then we refocused to try to use our strengths in our geographical area, which was basically the Midwest and surrounding states of Ohio.
Interesting. So walk us a little bit through the journey that you guys went from growing a successful business like you had to the eventual exit. What was there a specific triggering event that happened with you and the family or within the marketplace? And explain to us a little bit about the details around that.
Well, I would say the triggering events in us were, one was the age or the makeup of the executive management. They were getting at a point of time where they were questioning how long they wanted to remain in the business and how long they wanted to continue the business, and if they wanted to pass it on generationally. And the other thing was an opportunity that presented itself to us for other people. A couple of the companies approached us, and those are the 2 triggering events regarding our decision to sell. And it was a unanimous decision, even though we had operated 2 separate companies. We still met as an executive team collectively and made choices collectively for the business.
Really, I'd say that's a unique characteristic from some of the stories I've heard. And when you're referring to management team, are you referring to your family, or were there other people that were not family on the management team?
No, it was just our family. There was enough of us that we were able to fill most of the management positions or roles. Obviously we had controllers and we had safety personnel that we considered at a management level, but it was pretty much the family that directed the ship.
So how did the conversation go? I mean, was it something where I guess the question I'm asking is, did the third party and the age all kind of come together, or was there any plan that was going in front of that before that happened, or what were the different options that you sat down and ran with your family?
Well, I would say it was just pretty much the timing related to the offer and dynamics of the age of the management team. We did have an opportunity in the early 90s. Someone approached us when the bus industry was going through a big roll up from a lot of mom and pop or privately held companies in the late 90s. We looked at that point in time, but we collectively decided not to do anything. And so it was probably about 10 years later in 2008, 2007, we were approached and really got us thinking. And then we worked with an individual within the industry to help put our package together and help us solicit offers from the people that approached us.
Interesting. So when you guys sat down as the management team and a family, what were some of the kind of the non-negotiables? Where did you start? Was it a dollar amount, or was it culture and employee perspective? What were some of the key aspects that you wanted to make sure went throughout the sale?
Well, obviously the dollar amount. The other part was taking care of our employees. Like most family businesses usually have, employee turnover is fairly low, so you do have, at least in our case, most of our people were with us, I would say on the average 15 to 20 years. And that was both for all levels of the employee structure, whether it be cleaners and maintenance, drivers. We had a lot of good people for us, and a lot of people enjoyed working for us. So we wanted to make sure we took care of them from that standpoint. And also the deal that was structured properly. We elected 2 people, myself and my brother Tom, to spearhead the process once we decided to go that route and help prepare all the documents and deal with the attorneys and so forth until the deal was complete.
From start to finish, how long did the whole process take?
I would say it probably took less than 6 months. It moves pretty quick.
Yeah, it did. That's a very, very quick process. You know, one of the things that you and I have discussed in the past, and with the class that we're in, but you know, a lot of deals fall through in due diligence, and when they're packaging the deal in terms and conditions. You know, what were some of the surprises that you saw throughout that whole process?
Well, we were pretty sound. We had a pretty good financial structure that we were able to build with our business. So during the class, they spoke about the companies that were prepared to sell or ready to sell. We had a lot of that in place, and I think it wasn't so much that we had this master plan, but it was more just the way we operated our business. And so financially and the size of our company were just perfect at that point in time. Generally, within our industry, most of the bus companies are privately held, where there's smaller family operations. They generally don't get to the size that we do. When we sold, we were the 16th largest privately held bus company or transportation company in the country. So we had a lot of, I would say, cloud or advantages, or we maximized our business model, and that was very appealing to a lot of people that were looking at us.
How many employees did you guys have when you sold?
We had probably between 375 to 400.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty significant size company. So that, you know, kind of what you're saying with the amount of siblings that you've got and that size of company, the processes kind of have to fall into place because you can't be really jerry rigging a whole lot of stuff together, huh?
No, that's correct.
So who in when you talked about there's a couple different things going on with a roll up, and who were the different bidders that you went out and solicited? Was it third party competitors, or was it private equity groups, or who was the makeup of the different people you went to?
One was a private equity group, Fenway Partners, and the other one was a UK-owned company, Stagecoach Group, who owns Coach USA. Those are the two dominant players.
So when you guys finally decided, I guess the first question would be is who did you end up selling to, and what were the reasons you went with them?
Well, we ended up selling it to Fenway Partners, which is an equity firm, and then we were rolled up under their coach company, which was called Coach America. And they basically offered the best package all the way around for the company. And then eventually we were purchased or sold to Stagecoach Group, and the second transition in 2012. So really, both companies end up having or owned us, even though the equity firm was the first one.
Interesting. So what was your role after the transition? Did they keep you or any of your siblings on, and what was the transition like that?
Well, they kept myself and my brother Tom on as far as the executive management team, and then there was a couple siblings that stayed on in the capacities that they were in, which were on the accounting and financial side, and then also on our bus ticket or reclaim side of the business.
So you went from a pretty significant management role to an employee, and a lot of people that I know that have sold their companies and they've got some sort of earn out or some sort of stay package find it very difficult, and there's a lot of different challenges with every person. How did that work for you? I mean, what was the engagement you had with them, and then how did you navigate through that?
Well, in our case, even though that the company transitioned to an equity firm, we performed real well for them. We were probably one of their gems in their portfolio of business or bus companies. So we were pretty much left alone because we were doing things right and meeting their revenue requirements and sales requirements. So there really wasn't a whole lot of difference from that standpoint. However, in 2012, when Coach USA acquired us, or Stagecoach Group. My other brother Tom left, who was the president and general manager at that time. I moved into his position. At that point in time, there was a lot of transition and change to their business model, and that was a little more difficult to maneuver and to work things through.
What were some of the difficult pieces you saw?
Well, one of them was obviously going from a privately held company, even though it's by an equity firm, to a publicly traded. The whole financial and reporting side of it was much more complex. Their funding requirements was required more paperwork, more follow through. Their expectations and their business model was different. Some of their processes were different than what our processes were. So you were trying to bring those processes together, where you take the best of theirs and the best of ours. Sometimes always didn't mesh.
How did your employees take that with the new changes?
With the equity firm, there was really no problems through that one. I would say once we went from owned by a PE firm to a publicly traded, the overall culture and dynamics, I would say, changed and probably did affect them more so.
Yeah, a little bit more scrutiny, huh?
Yes.
So as you're going through the process, did you have all intentions of staying on as you saw fit, or did you have kind of a couple different gates in your mind that you needed to hit before you moved on yourself?
No, I planned on staying on through the first transition to the equity firm, and then the second transition through to Coach USA. I stayed on for 2.5, almost 3 years, and then I made a choice to leave to pursue other opportunities.
And the other opportunities that you're going through right now, can you give us a little bit of a overview of what you're up to today?
Well, one of the things I'm trying to do is to leverage my experience in the family business for the number of years I was in it, and all the dynamics that come across that, into a consulting opportunity. And I'm trying to complement that with the SEPA certification that you and I both have, and help smaller privately held businesses work through that process, whether it's a transition to exit the business, or it's a transition from a generational transition, or a transition to management buyout or something like that, so that they can work through those issues.
What are some of the common things that you see that people are doing that are kind of the first few things that you attack or discuss when you're sitting down with your clients?
Well, so far, the people I've spoke to, because I've just initially started that within the last few months, so I'm trying to build that practice. But the few people that I have talked to, they're totally surprised with the valuation acceleration model, and understanding that, and how that really sets the course for their business going forward. And the other part of it, the equation, is how many of them are just so ill prepared from the standpoint of having any type of documentation to follow that process, or any type of formal roadmap. It doesn't surprise me, though, because I think so many entrepreneurs are involved in building their business and operating it, that it's one of those things they realize they have to do, but it's not a priority. The priority is building the business, or maintaining it, or expanding it, whatever it may be. And I think they focus on that, thinking the other will eventually take care of itself. And as you and I both learned, that sometimes it doesn't take care of itself, and you really need to address those issues early on.
Yeah, the time to start planning is yesterday, right?
Yes.
So, when you look back at that's a very interesting past that you've had, going from family to a PE to a public company, and not a lot of people get to experience that. What are the two takeaways that you had, whether it was things that you did right or things that you wish you would have done differently?
Well, I wish we would have planned further out, or given ourselves a longer runway in order to exit the business. And just what I've learned in the class, and talking with Chris Snyder from EPI, there were things I thought we could have done differently to actually even increased our price, maybe not necessarily the dollar amount of the deal, but obviously what we were able to keep in our pockets through different tax opportunities or savings, and also through different wealth management opportunities with that. So that would be one area that I would say. The second area is I would make sure that you get a little bit more definitive on what all the roles are going forward after that transition, and make sure that everybody's on the same understanding, and that even the company that acquires you, it, see what they want to do. I mean, we had the opportunities to grow and had some major contracts come through that we weren't able to take advantage of because of the direction that the equity firm or Coach America wanted to go was a little different than what our business model was. So that at times we lost some opportunities because of that, even though we were very successful, even though that we didn't capitalize on some opportunities. So I would say make sure that you have a more definitive and clear understanding of what their expectations are and where they want to grow the business.
Making sure that you both have the same vision for the company and for the people and the roles and everything, huh?
Yes, because everybody, it's standard. Oh, we want to grow the business. We want to expand it here, expand it there. Well, those can be generic terms or generic understandings, and I think you really need to drill down and get some specifics.
So, one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs that have sold businesses experience from the stories that we've heard is the whole transition, not necessarily in the tactical way of the business from, the sale to the new acquirer, but it's the actual emotional situation where who am I without my business? Did you and how did you navigate that? I mean, you obviously have jumped onto something new fairly quick. How did you go about doing that? I mean, was there a process that you went through that led to the success or the complications of it?
Well, in my case, since I pretty much stayed within the business and pretty much maintained the same functions I was operating, even though we were acquired by a PE firm, and then also the second transition to a publicly traded company. There wasn't a whole lot of change for me. So that, say, third leg of the stool really didn't come into impact until I made a decision to pursue other career opportunities. And it took a couple months for me to, I will say, get my bearings and understand what I wanted to do and how I wanted to move forward. And I think that's happens to a lot of entrepreneurs because that business is their life for so long. And when you make a big change on that without any type of pre-planning, which I really didn't do myself, you have to address things. It was an odd feeling at first. The first couple of days is fine. Oh, this is nice. I don't mind sleeping in a little bit and waking up a little later. But then as the weeks go on, it's like, boy, I need something to do. I have to work. I have to do something to occupy your time. And for me, that part of it, I didn't really do well from that standpoint. And I seen some of those similar things as I look back on it after going through the SEPA class and some of the instructors that we had in the class, different siblings, how they each had a different third leg of their chair. Some handled it fine, some had a more difficult situation. So that in itself has been a learning for me, so that I can take that information and hopefully use that to my advantage in working with entrepreneurs or privately held businesses as they look to do their transition.
So how did your other siblings work throughout that whole process? I mean, because there was, I think you said it was just you and your brother that went on to the newer place, or you said a couple of them, but between the whole management structure and your dad, the people that didn't go on with the new business, how did they handle the whole transition?
Well, two of them retired. One retired and they knew what they wanted to do and they were very satisfied. The other brother, he retired, but it was, I would say, an adjustment. Took him about 6 months to a year adjustment with his lifestyle and coming to terms to what the business, how that didn't occupy his time anymore. He had to find other things to occupy his time. And then I had another brother that he went and did his own thing. He gave him an opportunity to pursue other opportunities and to build a business himself.
Interesting. That's awesome. What kind of business?
He went into the event management side of the business, which we did do ourselves, but that wasn't going to, we weren't going to pursue that after we sold the company. So he tried to do that part of it, and he was limited to a certain degree by his buy-sell agreement, but he tried to do that.
Fun, fun, fun. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with our community. Is there anything, if there was one takeaway for all the listeners, what would you leave them with?
Well, I would say early on in your process, whether you're just starting a company or whether you're a very mature company, that you take steps to prepare for yourself first financially, so that you and your family is taken care of, whether that's through estate planning or wealth planning, that process. I would also then look at the process of increasing the value of your business by improving your processes or more organic changes in the business, so that you have those first two legs of the stool somewhat in place. And then it gives you the opportunity to control what you want to do after that point in time, how you want to transition it, when, where, why, and into who.
And then if there's one way that our listeners can get in touch with you, what are the couple different avenues that you prefer?
Well, they can reach me in my email. My email is Chris Goebel at Crossroads Consulting Group LLC.com.
Perfect, Chris. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Okay, thank you.